Hey everybody, Conor here today at etrailer.com. We're going to be taking a look at and installing the CURT Trailer Hitch receiver here for our 2019 Audi A5. So this is what our trailer hitch here is going to look like while it's installed. As we can see here, it has a hidden design, meaning the cross tube of the hitch is going to be hidden behind our bumper beam, or behind our bumper here. So the only thing we're going to be able to see is the receiver tube opening. That's going to give us a very streamlined, finished, clean install look. So our hitch here has a 1 1/4 inch opening with a Class 1 rating. Now this is going to allow us to do many different things. If we want to hit the trails, we can attach a bike rack, or if we need to free up some space inside the vehicle, we can attach a cargo carrier. And last but not least, if we would like, we can still tow a small trailer. So in regards to towing, our trailer hitch is going to have a 2,000-pound gross trailer weight rating, which is the amount we can pull outward on our fully loaded trailer. It's also going to have a 200-pound tongue weight rating, which is going to be the downward force here on a receiver tube. Now keep in mind, the trailer hitch is tested independently of the vehicle. So we need to check our vehicle's owner's manual to 1, make sure that we can tow, and 2, make sure the capacities exceed that of the hitch or meet it. If they don't, we'll have to go by the lower of the two ratings. So if we take a look at the receiver tube portion here, something that CURT does on the Class 1s that I really like, is they put this collar around the outside of the receiver tube. Now it doesn't really serve a functional purpose, but it does look really nice. And behind that, we have our industry standard 1/2 inch diameter hitch pin hole, which is going to accept a standard 1/2 inch diameter hitch pin and clip. These are, keep in mind, going to be sold separately, but we also have locking versions as well to secure your accessories. And then at the bottom of the receiver tube opening, we're going to have our safety chain loops here, which will easily accommodate our smaller S-type hooks used on most smaller trailers. So in regards to install, this is definitely going to be something you guys can do at home by yourself. We don't really need any special tools, and you don't really need a lot of mechanical knowledge to be able to do this. So I definitely encourage you guys to try this one by yourself at home. There's going to be no drilling into the vehicle. We do have to trim a small portion of the lower bumper fascia here, but it won't really be visible from outside the vehicle, and it's a pretty minor alteration. So now we have a couple measurements here for you. The first one we're going to do is from the center of the hitch pin hole to the outer edge of the bumper here. That's going to be about 3 1/2 inches. That measurement will be useful when we're selecting our folding accessories such as a bike rack or cargo carrier. That way we can ensure while they're in the stowed position that they don't come into contact with our vehicle. Now we have a couple more measurements here for you. Something I like to do is a ground clearance measurement here for these vehicles that sit a little bit lower to the ground. I'm going to measure from the ground to the bottom edge of the receiver tube. It's going to be 8 1/4 inches. And then finally we have the ground to the top inside edge of the receiver tube. That's going to be used for ball mounts, so if we're towing a trailer we can get the correct rise and drop. And for this vehicle, that's going to give us about 9 3/4. So now that we've gone over some of the benefits and features, let's jump right into the installation and show you how to do this yourself. So the first step of our installation here, we want to come underneath the back of the vehicle here, directly below our bumper fascia. We're going to see 2 plastic nuts here. These are going to be holding the lip of the bumper fascia to the body here. So we're going to need to remove that because we're going to have to sneak our hitch up behind this bumper here. So we're going to take a 10mm socket and we're just going to remove both of these nuts here and save them since we will be reusing them. So now we need to open up the hatch of our vehicle here. We need to get into this rear cargo area because what we're going to be doing is, first we're going to lift up this floor panel covering, but we're going to be removing our spare tire here since we have a couple of grommets here that we need to remove, and then we're going to use those to install the hitch with. So now that we have our spare tire out, what we're going to do next is we're going to see this black plastic box here, which is a speaker. Depending on whether or not your model is equipped with this, it's going to need to come out. We're going to have a little hand knob here with a fastener that has to come out as well. And then we're going to have some 10mm nuts on the outside here in order to lift this out. We're also going to have an electrical connector we need to remove. come on the side here, we'll see our electrical connection that we need to undo. There's going to be a safety tab. It's this red tab here. Pull out, then we can press down on our tab here and pull the connector out. Now we should be able to lift up our speaker out from the vehicle. So now we're going to come back under the vehicle here. We're going to have this fabric covering. It's going to be held on by some of these metal nuts here. They're real thin material, so we want to be careful, but we're just going to take a 10mm socket. Just going to spin those off. There's going to be 2 in the front here and 2 in the rear, I believe, as well. Now we should be able to remove this and set it aside. Now that we've removed this panel here, we're going to be able to see 2 of our drain plugs here, which we're going to be using to install the hitch. So we need to remove both of those. This one here should just pop out. The other one, we're going to need to get a utility knife, some sort of blade, and cut around the sealer here. That way we can remove the rubber drain. So that one we could just push in, but this one we're going to have to cut around. So now that we've cut around it, I'm just going to take a pry tool here. We should be able to get it the rest of the way out. And there we go. So we're going to turn ourselves around a little bit here because we're going to come back under the rear bumper here and we're going to peel it back. So this cable here is going to be responsible for the hands-free hatch access mechanism. Since we're going to be cutting into our lower part of our fascia here, we don't want to cut this cable. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to remove it end by end. It's just sort of held in by these 2 little fasteners here. There's going to be quite a few of them here along the bottom edge. So we're just going to take our time and just pull it up. We don't need to remove it completely, but we do need to remove it enough so we have room to cut here without trimming into it. So that should be good. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and mark the area that we need to trim out to give us clearance for our receiver tube opening here out of the bumper. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to find the center point here on our bumper. So we're going to take a tape measure here. We're going to probably tuck it right in behind there. We're going to measure across, and whatever we get, we're going to divide that by 2. Then we can use a paint marker and mark the center line of our bumper here. Now we're going to take our center line here and we're going to measure out either side about 2 3/4 to 3 inches. 2 3/4 is what the instructions call for, but I always find that you end up taking a little more out. So rather than test fitting it, trimming it, test fitting it, and trimming it, we're just going to take out, I think, 3 inches. Now from the bottom edge here, make sure we don't measure upside in this groove, but from the bottom edge here, we're going to measure up 2 inches. So now that we have all of our dots here, we have our measurements, we can take some painter's tape here. I'm just going to align them with our paint marks here so we know which area we need to cut out. So now that we have our area marked out here, we're going to go ahead and trim it out. We have a couple different options for this. If you have a set of tin snips or even a razor blade, you can probably get through that plastic. It's not very thick. In order to get the best finished install look though, we're going to be using a Dremel tool, but if you don't have one of these, you don't have to go out and buy one. There are other tools you can use, which we mentioned. So we're going to make sure we have the proper safety equipment. We can go ahead and cut this out now. Now we're going to remove our tape here, then I'm going to come back with a razor blade and I'm going to clean up some of the rough edges. Now if you used a pair of tin snips or you used a razor blade, you probably won't have to do this next step. So now we're going to take one of our bolt plates here along with our longer carriage bolts. We're going to go ahead and just insert those in the bolt plate now. And once this is done, basically what we're going to be doing is there's going to be a bumper beam here, a square bumper beam on either side of our bumper, which holds a reinforcement support system in case we get in a collision. Basically absorbs the impact. But long story short, we're just going to be placing these on top of those square bumper beams there. So it's going to go up and over and sit on top of the bumper beam, sort of just like that. So it's going to be super hard to see this, but basically we're going to have to pull out on our rear fascia here, and we're going to have to slide this bracket with the carriage bolts up over the bumper beam. So the bumper beam is going to sit in between these two bolts here. So this is pretty much what it's going to look like. When you have that bolt bracket on top of the bumper beam here, this is the bumper beam we're talking about, and here's the end of each of our carriage bolts. So now we're going to come back inside our trunk pan here. We can see the two drain holes that we made accessible earlier. What we need to do now is we're going to be taking a silicone sealant here. We do sell this here at eTrailer if you don't have any, or you can just pick some up at the hardware store. But I'm going to make a nice thin line, well, rather a thick line here around both of our drain plug holes. Once that's done, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take one of the carriage bolts and one of these other blocks that come with our kit here. Take the carriage bolt, insert it through that spacer block there like so, and then we can go ahead and set the spacer block up through the hole here, aligning our bolt and using the gasket to secure it. So that's about what it'll look like once we have it done. We're going to go ahead and repeat that process on the other side. So this is what it should look like. We both have these blocks here set with the gasket on the bottom of our trunk pan. Now what we're going to do next is, this does vary a little bit from the installation instructions, but I've done this particular hitch a few times and found this is a little bit easier way to do this. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take something heavy and we're going to place that over our carriage bolts here. That way when we set the hitch up into position, we don't have to worry about pushing the carriage bolts back through up into our trunk pan here. So the next thing we can do is go ahead and raise our hitch up into position. However, but before we do that, what we're going to do is we're just going to show you, we're going to get our hardware ready, but we're going to show you how we can attach it better without relying on trying to line up these up behind the bumper. So when we do raise it into position, we'll pull the bottom lip of our bumper out here and sneak the hitch tube through there, but we're going to secure it using these two bolts on the bottom here first. That's going to hold it in place so we can get the other four nuts that need to go on up top. If you remember the plates that we installed with carriage bolts up there, those are going to be kind of hard to hold still and thread them through the hitch with our flange nut. So we're going to use these to hold it in place, and that's going to help us when we go to install those top ones. So real quick, before we set the hitch up into position, we're going to take the top side here of these two holes. Those are that go to the carriage bolts on the trunk pan. We're just going to do another layer of silicone around these just to help them seal further. So with an extra set of hands, we can go ahead and set our hitch up into position. We're going to need to peel back our bumper fascia here to sneak it up in there. And just remember, we're going to be securing the two trunk pan bolts first. So now that we have our trunk pan bolts holding the hitch up into position, we can use our remaining hardware to secure it to that bolt bracket that we use that goes over the bumper beam here. So now we're going to take our 20mm socket here, and what we're going to do is we're going to tighten up those four nuts here that are around the bumper beam. And keep in mind, we want to tighten them in intervals, working our way back on each side. Now that we have everything snug, we'll go ahead and torque down all of our hardware to the specifications in our instruction manual. So now that we have the hitch torqued down, we can go ahead and just reinstall everything that we took off, such as the spare tire. Make sure we put the hands-free cable here back up into the bumper beam and insert the remaining fasteners we have. And that's going to do it today for our look and installation of the CURT Trailer Hitch receiver here for our 2019 Audi A5.